we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm your lucky host tonight, Kelsey Gino, Secretary of INC, as well as President of Mayfair Neighbors, um, near and dear to my neighbors in Montclair. Welcome to INC's April Community Connection. We're so happy to have you. Like I said, for the purposes of time, we're just going to step in and get rolling. People are going to be rolling in. Just some housekeeping reminders. Please keep yourself on mute until we sort of get to the part of the program where we're looking for your participation, and put your name, RNO, and or INC delegate status in the chat. Another quick reminder, if you're having issues seeing people and slides, do remember you have a gallery option on your view settings. So do keep that in mind. Keith, slide.
Okay.
Gretchen, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'd like to read the land and equity acknowledgements. So the land acknowledgement, as residents of Colorado, we stand on the unceded ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota, and Ute nations and peoples. These lands were also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other indigenous tribes. We recognize Native and Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of this land and our presence among their descendants who still dwell within it. We pay our respects to Indigenous and Native elders, past and present. And the equity acknowledgement, we acknowledge that racial justice, equity, and climate justice are inextricably intertwined, and that poor, vulnerable, and primarily Black, Indigenous, and people of color disproportionately bear the burden due to the lingering effects of systemic discriminatory practices. We commit to doing our part to ensure that when taking any action to create a sustainable and regenerative future, we will respect, promote, and consider our respective obligations concerning all aspects of equity and strive to create systems in which everyone can thrive.
Gretchen, the floor will remain yours for a note from our fearless leader.
Oh, yes. Okay. And I have a introduction from Judy Baxter, our new president. She could not be here, but I will read a brief note from her that she wanted to share. Good evening, everyone. I wish I could be with you all tonight to learn and listen to the wisdom I know will be elevated in tonight's program. At its heart and history, Inc. is here to promote dialogue, transparency, and equity across all neighborhoods in Denver by connecting communities, facilitating leadership, and advocating for positive change at the local level. As we head into the 51st year of Inc., living into this mission, I wanted to just take a moment to both welcome and thank you for being the committed, active, heart-centered, and civically engaged representatives of Denver's neighborhoods that you are. You are Inc. We are also welcoming 4 new board members, as well as 4 returning board members, some in new roles, including Judy. We also have new and returning committee chairs. Together with you all, we will create our vision for how we will actually do Inc. this year. When I look ahead, I see Inc. extending the depths of what is central to what we do, continuing to build on programming, events, and new programs of activity that connect and advocate for Denver neighborhoods. We will do this through our monthly programming, the work of the committees, the events that connect and celebrate, and a Weaver Award program that you will hear about very soon. Remarkably, Denver is experiencing a time when many good efforts to engage and support neighborhoods are emerging. The mayor's quarterly RNO meetings, the new Office of Community Empowerment, City Council's effort to refresh and revise the RNO Ordinance. Inc. is one place for neighborhoods to come together, to hear different perspectives, and inform Inc. how to best support the diverse neighborhoods across this city. Tonight's program is a great example of Inc. living into its mission. Through Cara, DiEnno, we get to learn about implementable strategies for community engagement. We all need to get better at tapping into the diversity and energy that reside in our neighborhoods. Kelsey Gano is heading up the effort to gather your insights on the RNO ordinance revision and the report. We want to hear how you think Inc. can elevate your voice to the city. I am so glad I will be able to see the recording of this important meeting. I wish you all the best. Judy Baxter.
Thank you, Gretchen. Keith, if you don't mind hopping back to the agenda real quick. Thank you so much. So as folks can see, pretty hefty agenda here. I'm going to walk through this, but won't insult your intelligence by reading everything to you. Have two, we're going to sort of debrief some event calendar updates, and then we have a great presentation from our very own Cara DiEnno regarding a very interesting study done any number of years ago regarding civic participation. And then a bulk of our meeting will be spent on the RNO ordinance update. And we're so looking forward to hearing your thoughts and voices on that. So I'm not going to keep us going any further. So next slides, Keith, if you don't mind.
Great. Thanks, Kelsey. And again, if folks want to throw your name and your neighborhood in the chat and say hello, that would be great. I'm going to do my best to kind of monitor that, and hopefully some of the other INC board members will be able to do that as well. Just want to flag that we have a couple of things coming up. The May 5th in May, we have the May 5th INC Sustainability Committee meeting. There's an Inc. Transportation Committee meeting on May 14th. And I believe there is a ZAP committee meeting in the last week of April that I think may have been taken off this calendar. But
Yep.
we'll try to get that date in the chat for folks.
It's at the end. It's April 28th. It was on a slide at
Okay.
the end, but I don't remember it
Okay.
being up on this one.
Okay, great. And a couple things to flag. We've been starting to work a lot with the University of Denver and the interns with this program. And we're just delighted that they decided to take what we did last year with our Denver Community Film Festival, and they're showing Join or Die next week at DU. The public is welcome though. So if anybody missed it or you want to see it again, they're going to be showing it at the C International Relations Complex, which is the Corbell School in room 1020. And next Friday at 5 o'clock, there's going to be a discussion. INC will be there. We'll be trying to rope in some more interns for some of the work we're doing and talking about some of the great civic work we've been doing here as well. So if anybody's interested in joining, I'll try to put this link in the chat so folks have it. You're welcome to come, and we can cover parking for that as well. So if you're interested, let me know, and we can get your parking covered at a parking lot there. So just wanted to flag that. And then moving into our second annual Denver Community Film Festival, which will be next month on May 21st at the historic Elitch Theater in Northwest Denver. Just wanted to flag that, if you haven't been here, it's an amazing venue. It's from the old Elitch amusement park that was in Northwest Denver. It's the only remaining building from that. And they're going to give a historic tour at the start around 5:15, 5:30. So if anybody shows up early, they're going to do a historic tour of the building, which will be pretty cool. It seats about 600. So we're hoping to get as many folks as we can for that. I've emailed a lot of folks that were co-hosts last year about becoming co-hosts again this year. We would love it if you want to be a co-host. I'll drop some links in the chat about being a co-host, but we're still, definitely open to co-hosts that want to join and send this out to your members and really try to encourage them to come. The film, we're actually going to be an official film festival this year because we're going to have two films. The main film that we're going to have is Truth Be Told. It's about 45 minutes. And it's about local news, and it's centered here in Colorado. 9 News put this out last fall, and they interview 7 local journalists from around Colorado. It's a really nice piece. And then we're going to be showing a 10-minute film from Councilwoman Alvidrez's office about South Broadway. And I think there are some neighborhood leaders from the South Broadway area that are even interviewed. So that'll be pretty exciting. And we'll show that before this. So it'll be a great night. come out on May 21st. We're looking forward to seeing you all in person. That will be our main event for our May. So please come to that. Get it on your calendars. Definitely appreciate it. Um, Moving on. And yeah, I'm gonna admit a couple of people. If anybody is a co-host, and can admit people as well, please do that. So we want to start talking a little bit more about the Weaver Awards and the Weaver Award program I just want to flag in case they're on here tonight. Shelby Drulis, Annette Woodward, Lamone Knowles, and Judy Baxter, who's not on here, I know tonight, have been working their tails off, and I just want to send a big appreciation. Since January, we've been meeting every week for an hour and a half to try to stand up this Weaver Awards program in Denver this year, and I just want that is a huge time commitment already to do that. So I just want to thank them for their participation in this. But what we're going to do this year is try to give out 20 micro grants of at least $2,500 each to community-focused organizations and individuals that are really working on weaving and building connections and belonging in their communities and neighborhoods. What's unique, this is a national program that we've been asked to be part of. We are one of 25 co-hosts around the country. We are going to be the Mile High Weaving Group. We just decided that last month. So the Mile High Weavers. And the thing that's going to be our focus that's unique, I think, about the Denver program is that we're hoping to have individuals and organizations partner with registered neighborhood organizations. And so that is probably going to be a fairly loose definition. It can even be, if you're running some type of ongoing event, you notify your neighborhood organization and that they help get the word out. But we really are trying to focus on weaving and bringing individuals together and focusing on, the core mission of INC, which is, standing up and supporting neighborhood organizations. That's been one of my key goals since I've been involved with INC, is to try to get resources to neighborhood organizations. So we really think this is a good opportunity to do that. The application period is going to open this summer. It's going to run probably sometime between June and the end of July, early August. We're waiting from the Aspen Institute to find out some specifics about that. But we wanted to let folks know early so you can start thinking about ways that your RNO or community groups or individuals that are working within your neighborhoods already might be able to apply for one of these. And we're going to focus on June 2nd and June 30th to do a couple of programs that are going to be specific just about the Weave Awards and trying to get more information out about applying. So with that, you probably have a question of what are weavers and what is weaving? Really there's some open definitions of weaving, but it's really, everyday neighbors who are building relationships in their community and bringing people together. The Aspen Institute is pretty broad in their definition of weaving. They're looking for more than just kind of one single event or some type of online experience. What they really want weavers to be is folks that are doing things that are local, they're relational, they're mutual, and that there's benefits for different parties, and that they're inclusive. Everyone's welcome to come to these events or to whatever that is. So just those are some things to think about in your neighborhoods and in your communities as we're starting to gear up. You will be hearing a lot more about weaving and the Weaver Awards in the weeks to come. We have a whole branding package that we're getting out, press releases, all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to make sure we got RNO leaders information ahead of time so you can start thinking about what you might be able to do in your own neighborhoods. With that, moving on, as uncool as I feel I am, we are trying to be cooler, and we're getting on the gram. We've been on the gram, but we've been not lackluster in our Instagramming, and now we have some amazing interns from the University of Denver that have been helping us to build up our Instagram page. And so if you are an Instagrammer, we are on Instagram as well, and we would love to see you there. We're gonna, really work to be getting and doing more digital things this year, and this is one of them. So we'd love to, interact with you on Instagram. We have some, like I said, some amazing interns that are going to be putting up some really great content on there. And we'll try to use that in other social media platforms as well, but that's the one we're focusing on right now. So just wanted to flag that for folks. And again, I'll add some information of our Instagram account in the chat.
Keith,
Uh,
before we move on, we skipped something in our agenda, and that is introducing our new board
oh,
members.
I am so sorry about that. Let me go back. I think it's because I was already past our slide here. Okay, great. Yeah, so we did want to introduce a couple of new members that just came on our board, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to say hello. And the first is Gretchen Armillo. We had a couple of appointed positions that we filled that are for the next year until next March. And our first is our new vice president, Gretchen Armillo. And so we wanted to give both Gretchen and Adriana a quick moment to say hello, why you're interested in being involved with INC, and where you're from and whatnot. A little bit of background.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Gretchen Armijo. I live in Montclair and have been a resident here for 14 years now. Um, I have been a delegate to Inc. for the last few years. And then I'm also a city planner and worked for the city of Denver for 6 years. So was very familiar with Inc. from the Planning and Zoning Committee, the Transportation Committee, um, and so was just interested in continuing to participate in Inc. And I'm happy to serve as your vice president for the next year.
Great, thanks so much, Gretchen.
Mhm.
We're definitely excited to have you on board. And then Adriana.
Hi, all. I'm Adriana Lopez, and I am from Valverde. I am the Valverde Neighborhood Association president. And just so great to be here to connect with you all. My family has been in Denver for a very long time, about 5 generations. And I live in Valverde today in my mom's childhood home, my grandmother's former home before she passed away. And so just love what Inc. represents in bringing all of our neighborhoods together, working on these cross neighborhood issues that I think affect us all in different ways. And I'm really motivated by people who give so much of their volunteer time and really care about Denver and trying to make it the best city that it can be. And so that's my interest in Inc. I'm happy to serve you all and happy to come on board for the next year as well, and look forward to meeting you all out in the community. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. We're really excited to have you both here. All right, with that, I think, are we good, Kelsey, to move on to Cara?
We're good.
All right, perfect. All right, I wanted, Cara, I think you're here. I think I saw you jump in. Perfect. So just a quick little background here is, we have been talking about this a lot. We've been forming this relationship with the University of Denver, and it's really through the Center for Community Engagement for Scholarship and Learning, which is a really cool center that has done a lot with neighborhoods around Denver, and we're just lucky that they have done a lot with us so far since last fall. And Cara is the executive director of that center, and we're really excited that she did a little presentation for a meeting we had with the interns a month or so ago on Sherry Arnstein and this piece about this ladder of civic participation, and it just kind of blew me away in terms of, hey, this is really some of the things that we kind of deal with from neighborhood levels in terms of participation with the city and governments, every time we have meetings. And so I thought this would be a great presentation to bring to INC and have Cara talk to us. So with that, Cara, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and let me know if you need me to switch slides or anything.
Sure. Well, welcome everyone. I am Cara, as Keith introduced me. I'm also a resident of Denver. I live in Sunnyside. I've lived in Denver for about 13 years and Colorado for many more than that. If you want to go to the next slide, I thought I would share a little bit of my background and about myself and how I came to the work that I do now. So the slides that I was presenting that Keith saw are some slides that I have given for many years to an introductory urban planning course, thinking about how to do public engagement. Sorry, there's an echo for me. I don't know if there's for other folks. I'm not an urban planner by training, but my work has been heavily influenced and done in collaboration with many planners. I often joke that planning is all around me in the air that I breathe because I'm married to someone with an urban planning degree who very much likes to talk about city design. My background, though it's not in planning, is, however, in public participation and engagement. My graduate degrees are in human dimensions of natural resources, and I know that sounds funny, but I promise I'm going to get to why that matters and where that came from in a moment. But I had a specific emphasis in how urban residents engage with city green spaces. If I take you a step back, though, I graduated from Western Michigan University with majors in biomedical sciences and environmental studies. I really loved the natural world as a kid, and I was fascinated by science. But when I graduated, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, as many young 20-somethings are. And so I literally looked in a phone book, I'm that old, and I found the West Michigan Environmental Action Council. I drove down to their offices, I walked in their front door, and I basically said, I just graduated with degrees in environmental studies. Is there any help you could use? Is there any volunteer work I could do? And being a small nonprofit, they were like, yes, of course. So what they asked me to do, if you're familiar with Michigan at all, there's the Kalamazoo River, which is a Superfund site because of the pollution from paper mills there. And so there was remediation work that was going on to address the contamination, the most concerning of which was PCBs, which are a chemical that causes cancer. And they accumulate in fish, if you know anything, and then people eat the fish, and of course it continues to accumulate in human bodies. And so there was a lot of concern from the community because there were still people fishing from the Kalamazoo River. And so the organization asked me to attend some public hearings. So I would see the scientists on one side from the Department of Natural Resources and the Environmental Protection Agency over here trying to explain scientific information. And I would see the community on the other side saying, why is this taking so long? Our community is hurting. You're not understanding us. And there was this big divide between these two groups. And that's what really got me thinking about, what do I want to do? I want to understand why there's such a divide and how do we bridge that gap so that scientists can better communicate with communities and that they can really listen to what they're saying and be responsive to their needs. And so that really was the journey, my start in thinking about public engagement. And what led me to CSU for my human dimensions degrees. I wanted to focus on environmental communication. That's where I thought I wanted to go. But what I ended up realizing was that I really cared about the community engagement piece and centering community voices in decision-making processes so that it's not just, creating processes for people, but with people really matters to me. And so that's a little bit of my background that brought me to the work that I do. And if you want to go to the next slide, Keith. So when I talk about public engagement, I always say that it's important to me to explain why I use the terms public and engagement. It is very intentional for me. I don't typically use the term citizen because sometimes that can connote an exclusive or sometimes a divisive legal term. And we really want to be thinking about the entire community when we're doing engaged work. And I use engagement over participation because I am biased and I believe that two-way, mutually beneficial, reciprocal conversations are really vital to making the best decisions possible, right? And participation or involvement doesn't necessarily, have the same degree of emotional investment that I think is really important. Involvement doesn't always involve the same degree of impact on a decision that deep engagement can, or the sense of ownership and the relational aspect that I think is really vital. So public engagement is the term that I tend to rely on. That said, Keith, if you want to go to the next slide. One of the sort of key articles written by a planner in 1969 talks about citizen power. And so I'll use Arnstein's term of citizen power because that's what she was writing about at the time. But what's useful to think about is that he was trying to present to urban planners an objective for public engagement, how to redistribute power, in her words, from the power holders to the have-nots. Now that language is maybe a little outdated and not how we would use things today, but that's how she had framed things at the time. It's really considered a seminal article for public engagement field. The latter is simple, but I do think it's an elegant characterization of the problems and prospects for achieving more meaningful participation of communities in public decisions. She was writing, of course, at the height of the civil rights movement, and also at the time of implementation of massive urban renewal and social support programs in the US. And she was really critical of the superficial or worse, manipulative or placating participation efforts that she was seeing around her. And I think that her latter offered some inspiration for practitioners to think about how to design practices that centered people, communities, and power. And so you can see the ladder on the screen. Hopefully you can see it okay, but I'll walk you through the rungs of the ladder at least quickly, because that's what I was doing with students and that Keith found interesting and useful. So at the bottom of the ladder, you see these couple of categories referred to as non-participation. Arnstein described these as practices that are used to garner support without any real participation from citizens. At the very bottom, we see manipulation. And manipulation is often viewed as a way to educate stakeholders. The idea is defined in advance, and participation is really only done to gain public support. Oftentimes, citizens believe they're being given power when they aren't. And in Arnstein's words, in the name of citizen participation, people are placed on rubber stamp advisory committees or advisory boards for the express purpose of educating them or engineering their support. On the next rung up, excuse me, is the idea of therapy, right? And so this, as Arnstein described, is where we are seeing the people with whom we are communicating with as part of the problem, and that we need to cure the stakeholder. Participation as therapy leads to pseudo-participation programs that attempt to convince citizens that they're the problem, when in fact it's established institutions and policies that are creating the problems for citizens in the first place. And again, in Arnstein's words, what makes this form of participation so insidious is that citizens are engaged in extensive activity, but the focus of it is on curing them of their pathology rather than changing the racism and victimization that created the pathology in the first place. And so those are the couple of categories that Arnstein described as forms of non-participation that were occurring. The next sort of set of rungs, Arnstein described as tokenism, making only a symbolic effort to make folks feel good while maintaining the status quo. It can allow power holders to claim that all sides were considered, but makes it possible for only some of those sides to benefit. It doesn't necessarily work to reallocate power in the form of decision-making authority. So on the bottom of that tokenism set of ideas is informing. Stakeholders are kept informed of what is going on, but are not offered the opportunity to contribute ideas themselves. Communication is then one way, right? Power holders are oftentimes attempting to persuade the public to accept the information provided as fact or endorse the proposals put forward by those in power. The next sort of set of ideas is consultation. And this is when stakeholder opinions and views are sought through various means, but final decisions are made by those doing the consulting, right? It's inviting citizen opinions, like informing them, can be a legitimate step towards full participation. However, when we stop at consultation processes alone, and they're not combined with other modes, there's no assurance that citizen concerns and ideas will be taken into account. This often looks like things like attitude surveys, neighborhood meetings, or public hearings when power holders restrict the input of citizen ideas solely to this level. It can often feel just like window dressing, or when people's comments and ideas are reduced to statistical abstractions. All right. And then the next rung of the ladder is placation. When stakeholders do have an active role as shapers of opinions, ideas, or outcomes, but the final decision remains with the facilitator still. Two-way communication is essential, but participation as placation occurs when citizens are granted a limited degree of influence in a process. Their participation is largely or entirely tokenistic, and citizens are merely involved only to demonstrate that they were involved sometimes. That's when it's done in the most problematic way. All right, then we get to those top 3 rungs of Arnstein's ladder, where she was encouraging planners to be more thoughtful in public engagement processes and explore spaces where it can be an opportunity for citizen power. And so on the bottom rung, we see partnership, where stakeholders have direct involvement in the decision-making process and acting on the decisions, right? So there's an opportunity to really thoughtfully engage in two-way conversations to come to a decision between the power holders, the officials, and the community residents. In delegated power, the goal is likely to have been set by the facilitator. So delegated power is often this idea of the power holders have set the parameters, right? They have kind of put the guardrails on what the decision can be and what the sort of attributes need to be, but then allowed the community to make the decisions within those sort of parameters or that box that they have created. And then the very top rung is where stakeholders, there are no guardrails or parameters. Citizens are provided full control to set up the project, come up with a facilitation for how to make decisions, and then ultimately make decisions. So really have full control of the entire process, right, of determining the goals and outcomes all the way through the decision making. And so that is the rungs of Arnstein's ladder. I will say, right, there are obvious sort of limitations when thinking about something along these lines. Right, there's a temptation to apply universal judgment that only the things at the top of the ladder are good and the things at the bottom are bad. We certainly probably don't want to be treating people as if they're the problem, but there is likely to be space where informing and consulting folks is an appropriate way to engage with communities, right? Or an appropriate first step in the process of working towards more deep public engagement, right? And no model or framework can be, when it's presented as a simple metaphor like this ladder, can really address all the complexities of the real world. So that's the Arnstein's ladder, again, written in 1969, but I think it's a useful way for at least those who are engaging or designing engagement processes to think about how can we strive to do things that are reaching to higher rungs of the ladder, right? When are opportunities appropriate to be thinking about some of those citizen power categories, and can we be implementing those processes? I know the challenges can often be, right, that having the resources and the training to facilitate those kinds of opportunities, and really being able to let go of the reins in some ways to provide that power. So that's what I wanted to share with you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's anything else you wanted me to talk about, Keith, let me know.
Thanks so much, Cara. And yeah, we have definitely, if folks have any questions they want to talk about in the chat. We definitely have some folks that have expressed some opinions about different administrations. I think the thing that struck me about this is, having just been involved in the CBA process for a community benefits agreement. That was felt as opposed to some of the different things that outreach that happens in different areas. The CBA process really felt like what you had talked about and described as kind of maybe number 7 in this kind of delegated power where community members and neighborhood organization people were able to really kind of talk through, what the beneficial things were for a neighborhood, to figure out, to be part of that process. I think was really empowering for neighborhood organizers and individuals versus, and I also think back to, I wasn't here, and I think there's probably people on this call that could speak more to this, but I do remember hearing in a couple of circles how Wellington Webb, when he was mayor, basically for a bond package, gave neighborhoods and a lot of authority to kind of direct, what benefits were going to be in a bond package. And if somebody can speak to that better, but that was maybe the only time that's really happened at that level in Denver as well. So, are there other folks with other thoughts or opinions or questions for Cara?
I will say, Keith, I think we talked about this when we met too, that if folks are familiar with the concept of participatory budgeting, where citizens are given some sum of funding to make determinations about, the city does have Denver's people's budget. Can't get those words out, which some folks might be familiar with. I know Adriana is, because we've collaborated for a long time, and Valverde was one of the neighborhoods in the last round of the participatory budgeting process. And so lots of folks consider participatory budgeting a form of citizen control at the top rung of the ladder. But I've had some interesting conversations with folks who are questioning, in this particular example, while I do think it's great that the city is doing that, when you look at the dollar amount associated with it, right? Folks have argued or questioned, is that really just a form of placation, giving a small amount of money that folks get to control, and not relinquishing more control in other spaces? I don't necessarily have the answer to that, but it's an interesting sort of conversation, I think, to think about in terms of, where are there examples of that true sort of level 8 citizen control that are happening? Well, thanks all.
Yeah.
Seems like there aren't any other questions, so
So
I'll be
there's
on
some
for a little
comments
while
in the
longer.
chat. There's definitely some comments in the chat about different area plans and whatnot. Thomas, do you have a question?
Kind of an observation. It feels like through the process, we can be sliding up and down the ladder. And a lot of times it feels like they're trying to reach for a higher rung, but slip and kind of catch us and push us down in the process, if I can continue with that metaphor. What might we be able to do or think through in terms of, if we're catching that they're trying to do something at a higher level, but it's not coming through, how can we be thinking in terms of how we can, I don't want to say feedback, but like assist, like recognize, hey, you guys are trying, we get that. What can we do to
I think you might have cut out there a little bit, Thomas, at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm at the Lincoln Highway. What can we do when we're in a position where we recognize that they're trying to effect that, to rise up, help them rise up, help us rise with them to where they're trying to work at, rather than where we're sliding down to?
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question. I don't know that I have a really clean, easy answer to that. It's participating where possible. I think I saw some comment about trust too, because that is, in my work, a lot of what I do is train the folks who are going to be doing public engagement. And so I try to ensure that they are thinking about, what are the historic harms that, the entity, in this case, maybe the city, has perpetrated in neighborhoods that need to be acknowledged to begin the process of building trust, right? And then how do you go into a neighborhood not assuming that the neighborhood is a blank slate, that no one else has ever surveyed them before or poked and prodded and asked a million questions that then resulted in giving feedback that never went anywhere, right? How do we do our homework so that we know? And then how do we make ourselves, how do we live up to what we say we're going to do so that we are building that trust? Because I always say, like, the best public engagement processes, if there's no follow through where the engagement actually leads to some influence in the decision making process, you're going to cause more harm than you're going to do good. So I do think that it's, holding folks to account and when we can, but I also recognize why there's a why folks might be hesitant to participate in some of the public engagement processes sometimes because they haven't seen results in the past where their feedback or ideas were taken into consideration in any meaningful way that it appears.
Thanks. Let's go to Bill with your hand up.
Yeah, and Cara, thank you very much for this framework. I'm curious, and I'm kind of feeding on top of Thomas's question. I mean, judging from the chat and from my own opinions, I think, frankly, the engagement frequently feels like they're looking to check boxes. I don't think that's always the case. I think it varies depending on the department and the project and the individual planner. But my question for you is, do you know of any cutting edge, deep engagement tactics, methodologies that are coming to the fore that maybe people aren't familiar with? And the one that I'll throw out for you is I've recently heard about something called deep canvassing. It's being used most frequently in a political environment, but I'm wondering if it has any potential as um, a more thoughtful, a more thorough engagement in this kind of sphere. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with deep canvassing, so now I will write it down and go look into it. Um, you know, I I feel like the online space is changing everything so quickly, and I feel like in some ways we're behind in terms of thinking about, I think there's promises and challenges with doing online engagement work. It's really hard to build the relationships of trust, I think, through screen-based activities. And, there's lots of concerns, obviously, with the growth of AI and where things are headed. But I think some of the just traditional being on the ground in the community is, building relationships and listening to folks is what matters. And so I'm always hesitant about anything that's like new and innovative to recognize. Is it building off of traditions? Like, we kind of know what works. It's just, are we willing to do the things when it's messy, hard, it takes longer, right? And we have to justify it. So what often happens in deep engagement processes, right, that are take more time and like yield richer data, we often can't engage the whole breadth of people that a survey can reach, right? When we're doing those kinds of things. And there's still folks out there who need to see that we talk to, 2,000 people rather than we got really intense, thoughtful feedback from a group of 20, right? And so, like, how do we change the narrative of what we consider deep, thoughtful, influential information from folks? I sort of lean towards, like, I feel like we know what we need to do. It's just, are we willing to do it? Or are we too focused, like you said, on like checking the box? Most of the time it's this, like, I'm legally mandated to do X, Y, Z, and now I can say that I did them. And if anyone asks, I can point to the things that I did, and I can tell you, like, look at these hundreds of people that provided feedback, but it didn't necessarily lead to anything incredibly fruitful. So.
Thanks. We're going to do two more questions first from Henry and then Alejandra, and then we'll move to the next topic.
Hi, everybody. I'll make this really quick. Our RNO had a small victory on a parking matter where we stared down Doty and uh, got them to change a rule because they hadn't provided for due process. And I, I I did my best lawyer imitation, and they stared us down. We also got some help from a local TV station. Uh, but the question is, now that we have new leadership at DOTI, which is one of those organizations that really has become kind of a government unto itself, or at least we have a leadership change, perhaps this is an opportunity for INC and others, and we're all impacted by DOTI, to speak to the administration and get a little more say in how some of these big projects are going to unfold, or at least how to mitigate the impact of projects that are going on. And I'd love to know anybody's thoughts about that and how we might do that.
Great. Congratulations, Henry, on your win. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then Alejandra.
Thank you. Hi, Cara. Thank you for joining us today and sharing. I'm really interested in the part about the redistribution of power from power holders to the have-nots. And I'm wondering, we seem to be focusing on the power being on like city staff or elected officials, but I've also noticed that oftentimes there are certain community members who hold a lot of power and that they have a hard time transferring that power to the have-nots. What is and sometimes that's within the RNO system and how the RNO ordinance was created. So what is your thoughts on how to also, I don't know, raise awareness or invite people who aren't, city, quote unquote, the city, but part of the community, to be willing to transfer that power as well. So they have nodes that are the ones that have been historically marginalized, underserved, are also able to benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the loudest, most well-funded voices that end up being heard or invited to the table sometimes. And I want to give a caveat before I answer your question too. This isn't to say that I don't recognize how challenging this can be for planners and other folks to facilitate these kind of processes, especially in the larger political climate and context they might be working. But I think in terms of, I mean, there's a few things that come to mind. Like I think how we talk about these processes and people's participation, we use language oftentimes that makes it sound like it's the right fit for a certain group of people. We don't always talk about these processes in a way that is resonant with all members of communities, right? And so how are we talking about being a leader to come forward and participate and do these things? So I think the way that we frame things needs to be grounded in understanding of communities, and elevating, the kinds of, leadership or voices for folks who are on the ground doing the work, who maybe never see themselves as community leaders, but really have important things to share or to say. I had another train of thought and it's leaving my brain at the moment. But I think there's a lot to what you're saying in terms of, it's not just the folks in the city who have power. It is also, can be residents who are used to having their voice heard and are used to being center stage and are reticent to relinquish some of their power. And I know Arnstein talks about redistribution of power, in a community organizing sense. When we think about power is simply the ability to act, right? It's the ability to influence things. And if we think about power as this zero-sum game where the only way I'm going to get power is I have to take it from someone else, we're just going to be in a bad place from the outset. But if we realize that power can be relational and we can build it together, then I think, that it's the all boats rise together philosophy. And I wasn't there for the founding of INC, but I assume that's that's kind of the like bread and butter of INC, of this, like, as RNOs, our neighborhoods might be different, but if we are working together to build our power, we will have more influence in a way that hopefully all of our boats rise and receive some, benefit from engaging with one another in that way.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Cara. Obviously, this is an ongoing conversation. Really happy that you were able to join us tonight, and really appreciative of your time. I know you got a couple of little kids, so we appreciate you taking some time away from them to spend with us tonight. So definitely appreciate that. With that, happy to move on, Kelsey. I think to the agenda for the remaining discussion tonight.
Yes, thank you so much, Cara. And I think there's a lot of food for thought in the questions and engagement we've had in the chat and that presentation to take into this next part of our agenda. So my new fellow board member Bill Hare and I are going to sort of be your hardy stewards through an RNO ordinance update discussion. Really just looking to provide a place for everyone to sort of share feedback on the report and recommendations sort of by topic. So on the screen, you'll sort of see how we're planning to go through this. So Bill's going to give us a quick introduction and a key recommendation summary. Then we're going to do an around the city discussion sort of by topic, by recommendations in the report. Then hopefully we're going to summarize the discussion and feedback to talk about next steps. So Keith, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I think I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Keith and Kelsey. Hey, everybody. It is fantastic to be with you tonight. I can't tell you how much energy I have for this topic. But before that, I also just want to say that I'm really proud to be part of the Inc. board. I've been watching what Inc. does for many years, and I just think with Weave and DU and what Kelsey has done with our leadership summit and now the RNO ordinance, I think we're really at an inflection point with Inc. and I'm excited to be part of it. So relative to the RNO ordinance, hopefully some of you have been able to take a look at the report that was issued a couple of weeks ago. It is 132 pages, so it is a little bit of a daunting task, but I really would recommend you go through it. A lot of work was put in by the consulting firm Radian, as well as the two council offices that took the lead. And specifically, Councilman Cashman has been working on this for, I think, about 5 years now. So there's been a lot of work put into this. And I think personally, just to give you my 2 cents, really the vast majority of the report is very promising for the city, for RNOs, and for Inc. Our focus tonight is going to be on page 74 through 85. And what I mean by that is we're going to be focusing on the key takeaways and the community-informed considerations. There are 5 primary areas that were identified that are going to be the focus moving forward with putting the report findings into action. And you see them on the screen here. The first is identity and framework. We go to the next slide. Sorry. Thank you. So this area is really focused on the transition of RNOs from CPD to community empowerment. There's talk about renaming what RNOs are. It talks about the need to represent all residents, different types of RNOs, and it talks about RNO boundaries. So this is a jam-packed number one identity and framework. Second is membership, governance, and recognition standards. That focuses on standardizing membership and strengthening transparency and governance. Number 3 is outreach and communication infrastructure. and that's focusing on standardizing membership, strengthening transparency in government. Outreach and communication infrastructure focuses on launching citywide awareness and access, as well as building centralized infrastructure. Number 4 is training, funding, equity supports, and neighborhood liaison. And the focus there is establishing an R&O toolkit and academy, creating equitable funding, accessibility support, and launching a neighborhood liaison team underneath the community empowerment division. And then finally, accountability and collaborative resolution is establishing formal two-way accountability between city and R&Os. And then lastly, providing mediation and conflict resolution. So as you can see, even in attempting to just give you a quick summary, there's a lot here to digest. There is a 6-person working group within the board working on this, and we are very committed to seeing this through with the city over the coming 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, as long as it takes. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this from us. So before I hand it back to Kelsey, I am going to be doing some housekeeping. There's going to be a ticker running as each of you give your input, and we very much want your input, but we also ask you to be concise and stick to the 1-minute period. And also, I'll be policing a little bit if people are going off topic, again, for the same reason, just because we want to get everybody's input and stay focused. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And again, Michael gives us, Michael, 1 second. Henry, I just wanted to acknowledge your question about new Dottie leadership and what INC may be able to do. I did make a note of that. And I will certainly pose that to the executive committee and or the transportation committee to see if there's any interest with INC leadership requesting a meeting with new Dottie leadership. But I just wanted to acknowledge your question there. And Michael, the 6 committee members, that includes myself, Bill, Shelby Drulis, Keith, Judy, and who's the 6th one, Bill? And Gretchen, yes. Great. That's your hearty squad, sort of through that effort. And we'll get a little bit more on the other side of things. So again, we're going to break down each of those 5 topics by summarizing the feedback in the report and summarizing the recommendations. We're not going to read everything through, but really want to just provide an open space for everyone to share some feedback. Please raise your virtual hand by topic. So if you're really interested in providing feedback on the training part, raise your hand there. If you want to hold your tongue on the identity and membership in governments, that's how we're going to do it. So raise your virtual hand, and for each topic, we're going to limit it to 1 minute per person. That way you can try and fit as many people in as possible. And I think if math serves me right, which I'm not very good at, I think we can do about 5 to 6 minutes per topic. So that should permit about 5 to 6 people per topic. So with that being said, Keith, if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Kelsey, can I just ask one question for clarification? Can people talk about on more than one topic? So
sure.
Okay, so they can have a minute, on a couple of different topics or something. But we
sure,
and
yeah, and to the extent that you're finding your thoughts are echoed, feel free to just say, "Hey, same thought, Gretchen." Feel free to put that in the chat. If you have something you need to contribute after a couple of people, raise your hand. But if you're finding that you're just going to echo a lot of the same comments, just put that in the chat. Would love to have that going there. So Keith, if you don't mind going just back 1 slide. So like I said, we're going to sort of do a feedback summary based on what we heard in the report and then the recommendations themselves. So again, identity and framework, feedback summary. A lot of the issues they talked about were identity issues tied to R&Os and like zoning and planning, some role confusion, inconsistent expectations, overlapping boundaries. So we expect the boundary component to be one of our more interesting topics. So Keith, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. Again, a lot of what we've included on these slides is very, very synthesized from the report. So as folks have encouraged you to do, please do take some time to go look through that report. You can take a quick look here on the slide on what some of these synthesized recommendations are. Like Bill said, moving from CPD to community empowerment, renaming R&Os, creating distinction from HOAs and bids and JIDs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to open up the floor and stop talking because we really want to hear what you guys have to say. So raise your virtual hands and we'll get going.
Great. And
Brad.
just also, I'll just add that if you want to put any questions in the chat, and if you don't feel comfortable talking, I'll try to voice those along the way if we can. So.
Please. Brad, the floor is yours. At least I think that's your first name. I assume B. Cameron.
Oh, okay. Hey, thanks. Brad Cameron from Neighbors for Greater Capitol Hill. I guess I'm going to I'm going to jump to what I think is perhaps the most important point. I read through the summary, and the conclusion is that there would be some sort of sign up for citizens to get information from the city that currently is about the only real benefit RNOs get from this process. And to me, that's the most important thing. The bottom line I would say is, there's an awful lot of requirements that this contemplates for those who engage in this sort of citizen activism. And I don't see anything on the other side of it. There's nothing that indicates anybody in either city government or city council will actually listen to anybody any more than they do now. And boy, it's a pretty daunting sort of framework that is being presented, and it would be kind of a full-time job for a lot of people to do this. And so the real question is information, and that's the only thing we get now from the city for being an RNO, and that's why I key in on the summary point of citizens need to be able to get what RNOs can currently get for information. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. Henry.
Oh, just a real quick comment. Some of our RNOs in an earlier time were written into contracts between the city and other organizations. Like we have a neighborhood advisory council with the Denver Botanic Gardens, and several RNOs are written in as having membership or participation in the neighborhood advisory council. So as boundaries shift, as identity shifts, as names shift, we may bump into some other relationships. And I don't know whether this is something that some of the some of the city park folks have with advisory councils for the museums or over there or the zoo, but it's something to keep in mind, and would love to hear more.
Thank you, Henry. I saw one quick thing in the chat about resident-centered role renaming. I forget where the examples were, but I did want to print something off. I think they had like different, maybe in a different section, but they had sort of identified like 3 different levels potentially about, here they are, community building RNOs, then community building plus information sharing RNOs, then community building plus information plus advocacy RNOs. So those are the 3 different levels, at least in terms of the capacity-based framework. But they don't list any ideas on a name to reflect this resident-centered civic body renaming option. So to hopefully maybe answer that question. That is on page 76 of the report. And if folks can see the tiny number, I do have an asterisk next to these recommendations where you can find these more detailed recommendations in the report. So hopefully that's helpful to folks. Any other folks that want to give feedback on identity and framework? This is where the boundary standards are. The boundary standards are in the identity and framework. I don't know if anyone wants to share any thoughts on the boundary component. Anita.
Thanks. And I was actually going to be talking about the boundaries.
Thank you.
I think, I understand there's like the overlapping of different boundaries for different organizations depending on what they are serving. So I think for me, eliminating, boundaries and allowing overlapping boundaries to exist, it catches a different group of individuals. And sometimes, just as an example, in Westwood, they have 2 RNOs. They have Westwood, that is the only English speaking. And then at one point they had Westwood Unidos, where the Spanish speaking RNOs because, they didn't have the capacity to do translation or there wasn't enough engagement between the two communities. So I think sometimes, people have different perspectives on their communities, and I think their voices need to be heard.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. Anybody else?
Kelsey, could I jump in? I can't quite figure out how to raise my hand, so I'm
Oh,
just
hi,
doing it
Bruce. There
like
you are.
this.
Hi.
I put a note in the chat, but the boundary issue is especially complex given the history of how RNOs have developed, and I think that I like the idea of the classification based on size, but it seems like if we try to sort out boundaries so they're only contiguous and not overlapping, I think it's going to create a host of incredibly difficult issues, especially for an organization like Chun, which has boundaries from Broadway to Colorado Boulevard and First to 23rd. You can imagine how many RNOs are in that boundary space along with us. And I think we work well together, we play well together, but it does create some complications.
Great point, Bruce. And then to Deb's, just loving the engagement. To Deb's question about involuntary consolidation, on the very last bullet on page 76, it says develop an RNO consolidation roadmap that supports RNOs with notice facilitation and technical support to eliminate overlapping boundaries, for example, within 5 years. So hopefully that answers your question, Deb. So anyone? Oh, sorry, Deb, you don't want to say something?
No, I'm Jean Granville, but I'm
hi,
on my
Jean. Sorry, I
phone.
didn't see your hand raised.
Sorry. Well,
It's okay.
My phone doesn't let me raise my hand for some reason, so I'm sorry. I just wanted to say one thing about boundaries is that, the city boundaries for a neighborhood don't always make sense. And, Sun Valley, I think, is a really good example where we had that kind of eastern side of the river or the eastern side of the river down there, like with Meow Wolf and Steam on the Platte. I mean, they asked to be part of our RNO, just because in terms of the geography and topography and psychologically, they felt more connected to our neighborhood than they did to, frankly, La Alma Lincoln Park at the time. Now, I think La Alma Lincoln Park, with Burnham Yards and all of that, it's changing. And so that, will probably change as well. But sometimes I think there's just kind of linkages that occur in a more natural kind of way that are not very specific to the boundaries. And I do think that, we've worked through that with La Alma Lincoln Park in terms of having kind of joint relationships on that. But that has been a reality. And that was really coming from the people who and where they felt most comfortable.
It's a great point, Jean. And I think, as folks sort of go through this discussion with us tonight, and we're going to give you links to the all different opportunities you have for feedback, do be thinking about this and do share this with us, but most importantly, share this with the online feedback form or attend the sessions, because I think the beauty of RNOs is that they often reflect the needs of the people in the place where they are. That's not always the case, but I think what they have become is they just sort of they become the thing that people need them to be. That's not to say that it's the best thing in terms of representation or inclusivity. But in terms of boundaries, what would happen if my group, Montclair and Mayfair and Bellevue Hale, became one big RNO? Or what if there's a different way to think about it? What if you have more of a community-based group and then kind of like a zoning and planning group? I think there are plenty of creative people out there to think of different structures as to how this could be done. And I think we need people's creative thinking to include this in that feedback. So unless there's anyone else on identity and framework, we're going to roll on to the next one. Oh, Alejandra, did you want to sneak one in on this?
Yes, just really quickly, my understanding that these recommendations are based on feedback that the community provided at a lot of the workshops and through the surveys.
Yes.
So this is not something that, is being imposed upon us, but these are ideas that came from the community. So that means that community members are suggesting that we eliminate overlaps and prohibit new ones.
That is correct. So basically, for if just a little bit of recap. So Radian started with the two city council offices to go through this project. They were out in communities all of last summer, attending community events. They then created and worked on this report, released the report. They presented to council and the mayor twice now. And they are now in a second community feedback phase where they now have these recommendations and they're going back to the community to get feedback on these recommendations. And then they're going to go into a drafting stage. I cannot say whether or not, in fact, the drafting has already begun. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. I do not know. But the plan is go back to the community, get feedback on these, and then they will draft the updated ordinance from there. So there is still a chance for community feedback, which is why we're here to provide you those opportunities to do so. So thank you, Alejandra. I think that's an important thing to remember. None of this is guaranteed either. These are just what they heard. They're consolidating their data, and this is what they saw in the data. That's all this is. Okay, thank you.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but I did want Bill to be able to speak to this.
Okay, sure. Hi, Bill.
Hi. I just want to make sure that we talk somewhere in the ordinance update about what the role of an RNO actually is from the city's perspective. Is it a conduit for citizen opinions and beliefs to be passed on to council, who then make the decision? Does it have a role in the decision-making process? What really is the function of an RNO as far as the city is concerned? That needs to be very thoroughly defined.
I'm also going to count the dog barking as feedback on that comment. Thank you. Okay, great. Just for time purposes, thank you everyone for contributing here. We're going to move on to membership governance and recognition standards. Okay, great. Thank you, Keith. Again, you can read it here on the side. Remember, very synthesized. Some of the feedback they received on this particular area that they've determined inconsistent membership governance and registration. With that, relating creates inequity. A lot of folks contributed feedback on limited transparency in elections. I know elections and RNOs mean a lot to a lot of people, and unclear resident representation. So Keith, if you don't mind going to the next slide. And for those following along in the report, we're now looking at page 78. Again, folks, you can read here on the slide, sort of these are the three buckets that they've identified under the proposed approaches and recommendations. Take a read through these, setting eligibility criteria, no fees for voting, annual reporting and minimum record maintenance, conflict of interest disclosures, quarterly meetings, outreach and term limits, standardized bylaws, year-round registration, and defining eligibility for RNO recognition. Raise your hands. Let's chat. Ooh, this one's not as exciting, huh? Anita, please.
I mean, I see all of this, like the reporting and things like that. And, we do self-report for like our RNO, and then we do, the paperwork for the city to show who our leadership is. This is a lot. If this information is getting back to the city, we are all volunteers. We're very passionate about our neighborhoods. But again, if there's no compensation to our RNOs, this is another job that's not paid. And so I think that's the reason why a lot of people are not involved as much, because they do have passion, but then they have to, take care of families, take care of kids. So, I mean, there are certain criteria that the city already request of us. And I think, going back to earlier comment, it was we need to go back to basics of like, what does an RNO stand and mean for? And then on top of that, they change, like the tier on top of that. So again, if, we have to send all this information back to government officials, like for me, I feel a little bit unease.
Thank you, Anita. Bill, the floor is yours. Bill, if you're talking, you are on mute. I can't tell if you're talking because you're off video.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I think the list is excellent, and I think the way this is laid out is great. On the no fees for participation or voting, that sort of raises a central issue for R&Os, is that at times we may be negotiating with developers and other groups or trying to hold functions for the community. And if the R&O has no money, how does it do that? Okay, so I like the idea that everybody belongs to the RNO and the RNO represents everybody in the community. And that sort of eliminates the possibility of fees. But somehow or other, there needs to be a mechanism for RNOs to have the revenue to actually do their jobs. From anything like doing surveys of the neighborhood to negotiating with developers and for holding community events. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I totally feel and resonate with Bill and Anita's comments. Money talks, right? For better or for worse, you need money to do stuff, and I'm sure that's something that all of us can at least agree on. Thank you, Bill. I think Henry and then Richard.
Yeah, so I have a little bit different take. I'm inclined to agree with Anita, where there's a limit to a volunteer's ability to file reports with the city, to conduct meetings, to keep minutes. And I'm afraid that if there are too many rules and regulations where each RNO becomes its own bureaucracy, and so it's not possible for a single mom or a family or a person trying to hold down two jobs to actually participate in the RNO or lead an RNO, even though they might be very good at it. And then the only people who get to lead are the people who are retired or have lots of time, or in some cases might be city or state workers where they can, kind of carve out time to do this either like informally or use the generous city benefits to do this. And then we're back to square one where we have a RNO being run by, it's a conundrum.
Yeah. Thank you, Henry. Richard.
Well, I guess I would second Bill's concern about the fees for participation and therefore the funding of RNOs. I know one way to do that, and I know, with my RNO in Sunnyside, having a voluntary suggested the amount to contribute that probably would work and we probably can get enough, but I guess there's a concern that there may be some neighborhoods lower income where you may not have enough people that can voluntarily pay fees, and therefore that RNO would have less voice in terms of having less fees. So I like the idea. I just see some issues in terms of really getting more participation and RNOs being able to function.
Thank you, Richard. I see the chat is going off, so keep going, everyone, and I'm doing my best to sort of scroll through. But if you do want to contribute, at least verbally, please do raise your virtual hand. Is there anyone else who wants to contribute here on membership governance and recognition standards before we move on?
I will just say that having done this for a few years, that this is probably the area that I have the most concern about in terms of this potentially being an unfunded mandate for RNOs in general, just because I think all these things are great if they're coupled with some type of way for RNOs to expand their membership, become more diverse organizations, and not being organizations where only the people that have the time or the resources to run them are the ones that have the availability to do this. So that's just.
Thanks, Keith. Okay. Thank you everyone who contributed here. We're going to move on to the third one, which is, drum roll please, outreach and communication infrastructure. Personally, for me, this is something that my RNO a while back lost affordability to do, at least via mail, and we've now gone down to a much smaller emailed newsletter, which is done by me and takes a lot of time. So I'm glad that at least outreach communication efforts were addressed in the report via the feedback they got from the community, which I think is, again, something that all of us obviously have to do to reach people in our neighborhoods. So in terms of a summary feedback here, low awareness of neighborhood organizations and how to participate in them. No centralized user-friendly information hub for RNOs, aside from the map that currently exists on the city's website, and inconsistent technical and unclear communications. Don't have to tell me twice. Keith, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. Again, some of the recommendations here. Launch a citywide awareness campaign. I think that's a great idea. I'll share an idea that I've shared with the executive committee at the end of this presentation, something along those lines. They're talking about creating a central hub for boundaries, meetings, contacts, and notices, a citywide alert system, maybe some templates, talking about maybe more plain ADA-aligned communication, standardized city notices, distinguish whether or not an RNO is required to respond or not, and then again, distinguishing whether or not your feedback is optional. So raise your hands. Want to hear from you. Anyone? Does anyone have any thoughts on the public awareness campaign, or what that would look like, or if it's a good idea, or if they're like, no, don't do it, how would you do it? Curious to see and hear thoughts on that. I think I saw so what do I see come in first? I'll do Anita and then Brad and then Bill.
Yeah, I'm a little bit curious about like the campaign to increase awareness and participation because I mean, I think, just speaking for my RNO, and I feel like a lot of other RNOs are in the same boat of like recruitment and awareness. And, we have yard signs, we post on Facebook, we put flyers out in our local parks and, our businesses and things like that. So, I mean, like, what else can like the city help us with around that access strategy? What does that look like? And is it going to be in multi-languages? And does it reflect the demographics of RNOs? And so, I mean, it just gets a little bit more cumbersome as we think about it. So, it's just, I don't know. Everything I feel like goes back to money and like who's holding that money. And like, again, I think in the comments there was, if the city is getting us money, then, we're going to be held to certain rules and expectations. Does that also open us to CORE, which is the Colorado Open Records Act, when we are negotiating with, developers or when we're talking about something with parks, like, does that open up RNOs to any legalities?
Good point. Brad.
Well, I'm not quite certain what is intended by this, but the whole concept of communication from RNOs to me boils down to trying to let citizens know about what the city is proposing, from zoning to various transportation proposals and whatever. And quite honestly, the responsibility, in my opinion, lies with city council and with city staff. And it's sort of kind of surprising. I get 4 different city council newsletters, and how little information is included in them about what the city is doing. They're filled with all sorts of other sorts of things that try to show how they're active in things, but they're not really disseminating a whole lot of nuts and bolts information. And kind of seems like RNOs maybe are expected to do that when, we're not being paid to do it. And the city council and the city staff are the ones who ultimately have that responsibility.
Thank you, Brad. I wanted to take that down before I forgot. Bill.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was distracted for a second reading all the responses here, but
Me too.
I think it's a great discussion. I think a citywide awareness campaign about RNOs would be a great idea. But the first thing I would want to do is to in that awareness campaign, you, somebody needs to think about again what the role of the RNO is. Is the RNO primarily a conduit of its constituents' thoughts about uh, what's going on, city policies or whatever it is, a way for council people to get closer to their constituents by having an intermediary who provides that uh, sort of information, and so they can pass that on in council meetings, which actually have the authority to implement something, because RNOs have no authority, of course, to do anything. But it's like, so why should people join an RNO if, in fact, the council person has all the power and authority and is the one who is going to make all the decisions? Well, you need a role for the RNO, okay? And if it's not going to have any powers or any authority, then it is essentially a consultant to council and potentially to the mayor. Thoughts on that? Am I just off the wall here, or am missing something?
No, I don't think you are at all, Bill. I think it's a really important point.
Yeah, it's we have RNO meetings, and one of the first things that I'm struck by is people immediately, they're assuming that we can do something about the problem. Okay. And I really have to explain to them that yes, we can, but our role is simply limited to letting council know what your thoughts and feelings are at this particular point in time about issues that council is bringing up. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you could have a conduit organization, but this needs to be spelled out clearly and understood so people know in the community and the RNO what's the role of the RNO, what's the role of the
Well,
council person, and so on.
well
They don't
put.
understand
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you, Bill.
Well put.
Does anyone else have anything they want to contribute here before I maybe give Anita a chance to speak up again? Anita,
Thanks. Sorry, I'm taking so much
it's
time.
okay.
So for me, I have a very unique perspective because I was a former council aide to former Councilman Jolyn Clark. So I kind of understand, being in the city council office and role, and now being a co-president for my third year in Alkmaar Park. I think, Bill, it is correct. Like, we need to inform people what RNOs do, what does city council do, or what does the mayor do. I think a lot of times what is happening in the mayor's office that controls the city agencies goes and follows on to city council. Then city council goes into community and their aides try to get that information disseminated to community, which the RNO, and then it feels like the RNO has to go and send it out to everybody in their neighborhood. So, I mean, it's kind of like playing telephone, and it's frustrating because I understand where, neighbors are coming to the RNO saying, hey, this is what's happening, and we need to push back. And so the first person that we push back on is city council. And then city council pushes back on the mayor's office. And so sometimes it's like we also need mayor representatives, not only in his office, but also with city agencies coming to the RNO meetings, not when just like, oh, hey, this is coming into your neighborhood or we want your feedback, but like on a regular cadence. Like somebody needs to, come to our meetings and inform us besides, city council aides. They do as much as they can and, be present. And so I think it's just that whole thing is like going back to like basics of like what everybody's job in this ecosystem needs to do and how do we come together and in community, like where's the power and how do we, change, the trajectory of what's happening in our community? Because again, we're feeling like powerless with city council, we feel powerless with the mayor's office, or we feel powerless, with city agencies where they're talking to us, not with us.
I think those are great points, Anita, that actually are a great segue into the next topic, which we're going to move on to, which is training, funding, equity supports, and neighborhood liaisons. So sort of to your point, Anita, about finding out who is going to sort of be a conduit of information sharing. So here's, again, some summaries of the feedback in the report that they got, from their sessions and data. Limited training and structural support for RNOs, likely on, I think they mean on a citywide basis. Volunteers like governance, equity, and financial resources, again, sort of validating a lot of the comments here. Uneven funding, reliance on individual council offices, participation barriers like language, childcare, food, technology, Zoom, in person, hybrid. What do we do? And no consistent city contact for support or relationship building. So again, this is a synthesis of the feedback they got in the report. So on the next slide are some of the suggestions that, based on that feedback, they've created. So that includes creating an RNO Academy and Toolkit, which, quick INC plug, we're trying to do that. We have a quasi-inactive RNO Resources Committee, but we do an annual leadership summit. And I have some other ideas that I've been sharing with the committee on how INC can actively take this opportunity as it relates to this ordinance update. Another idea they had is creating equitable funding pathways, trying to reduce reliance on council-specific funding, grants or stipends, supporting equity training and administrative standards, accessibility supports like translation interpretation services, and launching a neighborhood liaison team, which would be dedicated persons for compliance, communication, and trust building. Friends, raise your hands. Let's chat. Some feedback on these pieces here. Would love to hear them. Anita, love the enthusiasm. If anyone else wants to just have a quick shot here.
And Anita, if you
Anita,
can stick to the 1 minute, that'd be great.
Yes. Okay. Anita, I'll get to you third, if that's okay. I'm going to start with Alejandra, Bill, you, and then I'll go to Margaret.
I'm happy to wait if Margaret wants to speak first, since it's her first
Oh,
time.
that's so nice. Yes, let's do that. Thank you. Unmute yourself there. Perfect. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, the funding inequity is something that stymied us over and over again. And being able to even tap into what the city was willing to give us, we had to be literally like an LLC. And some of the neighborhood associations had to hire a lawyer to help them be able to get a grant. And we had no idea how to do that without spending the money we didn't have to be able to get the money we needed. So this is that funding inequity is huge. For little, we have a tiny, tiny little RNO. Yeah, that was my point, is that we just getting that funding or even figuring it out. I think I put something in there saying that I walked at least 20 miles twice a year to hand out flyers that I paid for printing.
Well, thank you for your efforts. And I think we totally, at least I personally hear you on the funding piece there. I'm going to go maybe to, who did I say? I had Anita and Alejandro. Do you want to go next? And then I'll do Gretchen, Bill, and then Anita.
Okay, yes, thank you. I was just thinking about the translation and interpretation piece and the childcare, food, all of those things. I think it would really help increase diversity and, expand a lot of places and community meetings I've been to. Having food is such a big draw, and also like meeting in person, and maybe also doing like going from one place to another place, to not always be the same location or always be online, so that give people options. So maybe this month I cannot attend, but next month I can, because maybe it's closer to my home or whatever. And yeah, I think that part is really important, and I support that one.
Thank you. Gretchen. Oh, Gretchen. I can't see you anymore,
I'm on
Gretchen.
mute.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak in support of the compliance bullet there. To like a tool, I think a toolkit with guidelines and best practices would be helpful. Um, Sometimes in our RNO, we're not sure about how to take positions on issues. If we vote as a board, does that mean we're representing the neighborhood? If we're not, then how do we represent and get the larger representation? So I think that these tools would be very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill.
Thank you. Another great list here, by the way, and these are all essentials. One thing that I think RNOs could use is a way to communicate to the people who actually live in the RNO. Believe it or not, we don't have complete lists of residents, whereas I believe council probably does. And certainly there are voting lists and voting and so on. I'm not saying that RNO should have direct access to those lists. There are all sorts of legal issues there that are involved, but having indirect access to that and to also to a survey system that would allow RNOs to, first of all, find people who belong to the RNOs so they can communicate with them, and then periodically survey people in the RNO on particular topics so that that survey information can be passed up to council, to aid council in making decisions with input from the RNO.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Anita, is your hand still up?
Yeah, just a quick thing. So the Human Rights and Community Partnership in the city, they already have a My Academy that I think they should expand to RNOs because that would give them training on the outreach governance and what every city agency does.
You said that was My Academy?
Yeah, My City Academy.
Okay. Thank you. I took that down. That's very helpful. Anyone else on anything here? Again, this is page 82 of the report, if anyone happens to have that massive document up on up or printed. Anything else here?
Joe Untine, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I don't think to just interrupt, but I've often wondered, I've been around since Ink was created almost, but I've often thought, when I was reading this over the other day, some of this stuff, I believe, should come through city council, and they are the connection to the RNO. So the funding is through the city council office for the RNOs in their district, and if we need to get flyers out to places, that cost gets run through the city council office or something. I feel like the city is putting all this on our volunteer organizations that, and you can limit board membership and terms and everything. I've been on the board for 16 years because nobody else will step up. I'd love to have a 3-year term and get down, but so
I think you just warmed the hearts of a lot of people on this call. So thank you for sharing that, Joe. Yeah, I just want to thank all of you for sharing all this. One, I hope it's a little cathartic to at least put your voices and thoughts and feedback in a place where I'm hoping you feel validated and engaging in ways that maybe could even help you before it actually maybe officially comes in whatever capacity that may be. So unless there's anything else here, we're going to move on to the last one and then hopefully bring you some very helpful avenues, one of ideas that we have as a board, and then ways that you can continue giving your feedback. So Keith, if you don't mind, we're going to roll to the last one. Okay, accountability. Oh, There we go. Yes, thank you so much. Last one, if you're looking at it, it's on page 84 of the report. Accountability and collaborative conflict resolution, feedback summary, no clear process for raising governance or engagement concerns. To Margaret's point, like, do you need to hire a lawyer? Like, how expensive is that going to be? Or is there a list of pro bono lawyers who help with some sort of like community engagement work, right? That's just piecing all these together. Boundary and overlap disputes, weaken trust and effectiveness. Again, boundary conversation is going to be a big one. Unresolved tensions create new and confusing RNOs, right? Like if you have one that's formed that doesn't necessarily represent the views of the other, one is created, and then which one do I join? How do I spend time finding what one matches my values, et cetera? Closed decision making reduces credibility and trust, and weak accountability mechanisms. Again, I think people have experiences in a lot of these areas. So some of the recommendations we have on the next slide, and those include establishing a two-way accountability process and providing mediation and conflict resolution support. Any thoughts on this one? Keith, you might move into the next slide. Sorry.
Yeah, Nick. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thoughts on this one here? Anyone want to share? I think someone had mentioned in the chat that the city already may have mediation services. I don't know what that is, or if there's sort of limits onto what that what the subject matter of a mediation could be. But if you don't mind maybe bumping that back up in this part of the chat, that would be great. Adriana.
Go
Please,
ahead.
Adriana.
Okay. I was going to say something that's interesting too that might fall under this section is the power dynamic. And I think Cara was talking a little bit about this in her presentation as well. And so with whatever reforms are forthcoming, I think between the amount of effort and free labor that the volunteers take on, which in a lot of ways, like we've discussed, it feels as though some of those responsibilities truly should fall with city staff. And one of those reasons is not because I'm not saying there's checks and balances for the power dynamic among city staff, certainly not. But as volunteers, sometimes I've found, just being in different discussions with other RNOs, that some volunteers are afraid to speak up about certain things with city staff and or their council folks because they don't want to like become blacklisted or anything like that. And I think that's a real consideration. And so if there are going to be some reforms that are forthcoming, I think creating some safety around community voice and how and when neighbors share certain things that may be in opposition to their council members or again different departments or the mayor's office, that doesn't then lead to, okay, well now we're not going to include you in certain projects. So I can't say that's something I've experienced firsthand, but I know it's come up a number of times for different volunteers within the RNO. So I think it's worth raising.
That's a great point. It's a great point. Anyone else here? I'm sort of sad to think that RNOs need mediation, conflict resolution, but I think it just all depends on where you live and the people, that are sort of active in the community. This wasn't something that was on in my head for a type of support, but I'm happy it's in here as a potential recommendation for a resource. Thomas.
So I have a different take on mediation, not so much within the RNO or between RNOs,
Right.
although I do, right, but between the organizations or the, I'll say developers that we are interacting with. Sometimes we just can't come to a satisfactory agreement or there is no movement, and yet we're expected to come up with something, otherwise forever hold your peace. And so like we just had an incident where a liquor licensee, application licensee, I don't know, they rejected the GNA process. And so we're like, okay, well, what do we do? Do we try and say, well, they shouldn't have a liquor license because because they weren't willing to interact with a GNA, or just have a no position? We don't know. And so that might be another opportunity for some intervention. Maybe it's not arbitration. Maybe it's not as formal as that, but I think there is some opportunities for us to get some insight on a more professional, dare I say, legal level.
Thank you, Thomas. We're going to go to Thomas for the last question so we can sort of stay on our timed agenda so we can talk about next steps before we wrap the meeting up. So Thomas, the floor is yours. Thank you for coming tonight. Oh, you're on mute.
Not. Here at Loves Like Citizens Group, in the past, when we've had zoning changes requested by developers, and there's been a lot of pushback from adjacent neighbors or general pushback from people, the city has provided mediators to come and meet with us. However, I don't know whether the process doesn't work or the people that they chose weren't good at it, but it was kind of a waste of time,
Oh,
in
no.
my opinion. But it has, we've been involved with it 2 or 3 times in the past few years.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I think that's really valuable to hear, and I'm glad at least people are familiar with this resource. I had no idea it existed. Bill, I know your hand's up. If you don't mind putting your thing in your comment in the chat, we're going to move on to the feedback summary, and we can talk about next steps and opportunities for everyone to continue providing feedback. So, Keith, Bill, please help me out here in terms of trying to quickly synthesize a lot of the feedback we've heard tonight. Funding, job shifting, unclear in terms of who's going to police or mitigate or track or organize a lot of these efforts that may not be super clear from the recommendations in the report. Am I missing anything? Do folks want to tell me that I'm wrong? Please tell me that I am.
I guess what I've kind of taken from this discussion a little bit is there's a large amount of concern about the amount of work that is proposed and the volunteer, and that there's not really a clear understanding of some of the parts of volunteer work that's involved in the running an RNO. And then I think that includes everything that goes to forcing an election for a new board when there's nobody to step up to that position, and trying to so it's a lot of things that INC has been working on actually over the last couple of years. At our last leadership summit, we included a speaker on organizing and how to do board recruitment for passing succession on and things like that. So really having a better understanding of the role of volunteers and the amount of work that goes into all the different aspects of these neighborhood organizations.
And I think that is a very similar experience across RNOs, despite whatever any major subject matter may be different amongst RNOs, because I know some are very liquor license heavy, some are very zoning heavy, some are very development heavy. And I think that fact alone is understanding what it means to be a volunteer in an RNO. Some of the feedback I've heard, at least, is that may have been a bit lost on this team gathering this data. So with that, we're going to sort of take this discussion. I'm going to stay on this Zoom and read through all of the comments because I don't want to miss anything. And then we wanted to share an idea with you that I brought to the executive committee, which received a little bit of support, sort of hence the 6-person RNO working group. I thought, sort of how Bill mentioned, with all of these opportunities between the RNO ordinance and Stephanie Lang at the new director of Division of Community Empowerment, and the Weave program, like I think INC is in a unique position to provide and actively promote the resources that we're hopefully already providing to RNOs, including funding and the leadership summit and those types of events. So what I propose is a dedicated INC city liaison position that this person would serve as like a direct city communication conduit. So it would be sort of one dedicated person at INC and city. City could include, mayor's office, city council, different departments. Like they would at least know that one person or a team of people that will, if you receive an email from that person, it is like, you know who to expect it from instead of potentially receiving different emails from different peoples. And this is really hopefully a way to also build relationships within the city, kill them with kindness and advocate for the power that we, hopefully can bring and help facilitate some of these ideas in the report, including a leadership summit or a mentorship program and the grant opportunities with Weave. So that's something we're looking into doing and really hope to at least advocate for ourselves in terms of what support and collaboration partnership we can bring. Gertie.
I would just suggest that it not be just an INC person, but it be an RNO person, because otherwise the INC person is going to be overloaded. And I think, well, I guess.
How do you mean RNO person, Gertie?
Well, I mean, a representative from the RNO. We shouldn't have to go through INC in order to reach this liaison, whose job I would think it is to reach out to neighborhoods, not just INC, but reach out to neighborhoods. I'm reacting to what you just said.
No, I hear you. I think maybe I didn't explain it clearly enough. More as just an INC dedicated conduit between INC and the city, so the city can like reliably have one person serving as its communication conduit instead of potentially having, myself or Keith or anyone else emailing for, whatever it is, we may have questions on, and like things with Stephanie, right? Like if Stephanie has 4 people from INC emailing her, it can get a little bit overwhelming. She may not know who to respond to. So something to just sort of maybe make relationship building within those city departments a bit easier. You wouldn't have to go through us to like do anything. It was more of just like us creating a hopefully more convenient and efficient relationship at the city level. So just an idea we're sort of in the early stages of thinking about. Wanted to put that out there to the group. So Keith, if you don't mind going to the next slide, would love to hear your thoughts on that. Please let us know. Okay, Keith, if you're able to put these links in the chat, that would be most helpful. So we're good on time here. 4 opportunities for feedback, and I would say probably the most important one in terms of like the data being captured for purposes of the Your City, Your Voice report and the RNO ordinance update is the online feedback form, as well as attending the one was tonight and the next 4 upcoming community feedback sessions hosted by the Your City, Your Voice team. There's one tonight in Northeast Denver. There are 3 more in the 3 other quadrants of the city and 1 virtual option. So please go to that website and attend. It's more of an open house. They're not going to be presenting. Really, they're just going to have the recommendations up on boards and they're going to be there for your feedback. Please also use the online feedback form. It is substantive. It captures everything. There are pop-outs that you'll need to click to fill it out. But please do take what you've given us tonight verbally and do put it in the feedback form, because that is what they will likely use as the bulk of their feedback for the RNO ordinance draft. We also encourage you, obviously, to reach out to your council member. They may tell you to just fill out the Your City, Your Voice online form. But again, I think vocalizing and advocating for your RNO and what your team needs and what they should consider in this process is important. So please do contact your city council member. If you don't know who that is, please go to this website and you should be able to find out who that person is. I'd be surprised, but it's not impossible. And then we've created a very, very basic survey, very open-ended by topic that we went through tonight. We would, if you're so inclined, after all these other feedback opportunities, if you're so inclined to give your feedback to us, we would love to hear it, because that would again help us form our potential outreach and recommendations to the Your City, Your Voice team in whatever letter or conversation we may have moving forward. So those are some next steps we have for you. And Keith, if you don't mind going to
I'm just
the
gonna
next,
take a second here, Kelsey, to kind of hop on and ditto the part about council member outreach and feedback. You know, it is really important, if you all have things that you like, things that you are concerned about, to reach out to your council district office and voice those concerns. They should want to know what your opinions are as the RNOs from their offices, and have that separate from feedback that's coming from the report or from the group survey on this. So please do reach out to your council district offices and let your council members know how your RNO experiences the work they're doing, and how your thoughts on the report. Kelsey, what slide did you want me to go to?
Well, you can go back to the previous one. Yep. So again, there's always an open invitation for RNOs to, oh, sorry, the next one, Keith.
Oops, sorry.
This meeting is being recorded.
Beep, boop. Again, the team, anyone on this call is, whoever just joined, if they could mute. There we go. Thank you so much. Always, there's an open invitation for your RNO to host a monthly INC community connection meeting. This is an aside every month, but you would receive, $250 in monies from INC to help facilitate that, or $300 if you're in a Nest neighborhood. We would need at least a couple of months before your date to confirm everything. You'd be responsible for arranging the venue and food and marketing and coordinating a program with the executive committee. But we're more than happy to provide support for any group on this call that's interested in hosting one. Next slide. Again, yep, there's the April 28th ZAP committee meeting date that wasn't on the first slide. Sorry about that. So here's sort of what's going on through the end of May. And then please do also refer to the calendar in the email newsletters that you get. All of our upcoming event dates are also in that email. Next slide, and that should be the last. Again, if you're inclined to maybe help the working group on the RNO stuff, if you're interested in learning more about Weave, if you want to maybe help with social media, or just interested in more in INC generally, please either become a member of INC or contact Judy or Jane to learn more. Yes.
One is, there's one group of people that are not represented here tonight, and I just want to flag that I think this is an important group for the city. And those are people that are not involved in their registered neighborhood organizations, but may want to be. So I just want to make sure that we are all aware of that, and that our thinking, we all come from neighborhood organizations and the work that's being done there, but the city is really trying to reach out to people that want to be involved that aren't, as well. So we just need to keep that in mind as we're having these discussions. And then finally, we would love to see you all in person next month on May 21st at the Community Film Festival. It's going to be a great gathering, and we hope to see you there. So I'll sign off after.
Thanks, everybody.